Welcome to a closing session to do with our reflection today on transport. We've had a series of exchanges in this and other rooms through the day, and we have a hard stop in 20 minutes, even though we're starting already 15 minutes late. But we need to run this train on time because we've got to be somewhere else at 5 o'clock. So it's in the nature of things that there will be a bit of time pressure on our colleagues. It's my pleasure to invite to make a kind of summary of what his takeaways are from the sessions of today. Nicolas Beaumont, who is the Sustainable Development Mobility man from Michelin and who will be giving a feel for the day's work. I will begin with you, Nicolas, if I may, and then open up with the colleagues.
We were able to see all the stakeholders of transport. Everybody was there, public, private, NGOs, companies, and we covered all the aspects of transport, passenger and freight, and sometimes we don't talk a lot about freight, but this time we did quite a lot. Ground transportation, including walking and cycling, which is extremely important, sea with shipping, and air. And it's very, very clear that the solution in the future is going to be multimodal and that all these types of transport are going to exist. We saw many practical examples of actions that are already taking place today. And all these actions and all these elements basically are there to nourish the NDCs of the countries. We are all actors that are there to help governments to design one way or the other their NDCs, because you know that we are in the COP process that go through these government negotiations. What's interesting also is we talked about the IMO and the ICAO, which are not, as you know, under the Paris Agreement, but we know that maritime and air transport are also doing their part, even if they are not part of the Paris Agreement. Now, to go back to the topics that were looked at, there's not one unique solution. And if we look at the solution that were talked about, they really are very close to what is in the roadmap, the PPMC roadmap that you can see on that side of the room. The 8 domains being, we talked about urban transformation that is necessary, low carbon energy supply, modal efficiency improvement, optimize supply chains and how to manage the contractors and subcontractors, unnecessary travel reduction, tailored solutions for rural world, investment in adaptation and economic instrument. And all these are extremely important. And out of that came some ideas that are very important. A need for alignment. A need for alignment about measurements that need to be standardized to set the base in each of the types of transports, to set ambitions and to be able to follow the progress. Some methodologies and toolkits needs to be developed, and they are. We had discussions about the roadmap, the ITF, IDRI. Everybody is defining methodologies, toolkits. They need to be shared. There needs to be some capacity building to train people. And there were discussions about training the truck drivers, about economy driving. And all this needs to be done, taking into account 3 aspects that are avoid unnecessary transport, shift when needed to new transportation modes, and improve. And we made a lot of impact on improve, because people like usually, human beings like to do new stuff. So shifting is something nice. Improving is more complicated, seems more complicated, but in reality it's more simple. We had discussion about the fact that for heavy load vehicles, we could already improve the fuel consumption by 35% only by applying what exists today. So it's very important, and we looked at it in all the sessions, to always take into account, avoid, shift, and improve. About costs, there were discussion about financing, and also in many of the sessions, the fact that transport costs do not reflect the external costs is an issue. And it's where governments, through incentives or political framework, should work towards improving the fact that these real costs, external costs to the environment, to the population, are reflected in the real transport costs. Then to finish, all these solutions cannot be global. And we had examples from cities, from countries. So all this need to be localized. And that's where the NDC come into place, because they really need to reflect the reality of the country, taking into account what's done in the cities, what's done in the regions. And there were some interesting discussion about including local, really local city needs into the country NDCs and not keep them global. So this is the way I would summarize. We are all actors, and our duty is to fill with ideas, with pilots, with methodologies, with way of measurements, with standards, the NDCs that are going to be made by the countries in the COP process.
Thank you for that very quick but quite comprehensive overview, Nicola. Let me turn, if I could, to Frans Marais. Frans is from the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. He's head of the Division on Water, Urban Development and Transport. He's based here in Bonn. Frans, just taking up that point about nationally determined contributions, about what's happening here in Germany, about incentives and disincentives, encouraging and discouraging things, about measuring things in the same way. It's a question inside Germany, but a question for all of us about getting that thing right. What is it? Is the index of our improvement? What is your thinking and what is your state of progress to do with some of those kinds of issues here in Germany?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, I must excuse myself for reducing even less the gender balance on this panel. Because my Deputy Director General, Tanja Vorwerk, unfortunately had a collision. You may know that we are in turbulent times in Germany. We are discussing a new coalition agreement, which means that our political leadership had to change their plans, which means that there are changes elsewhere. So I hope that it's okay that I'm sitting here on behalf of Tanja. And actually, let's say we are working on one point, one topic in Germany very strongly. Possibly some of you know the term of Energiewende, the energy transformation, which I think has gone very far in Germany with regard to renewable energies, to different modes of producing energy, and as you say, also of avoiding the the wastage of energy. There is now an initiative to design the Verkehrswende. A very strong shift in how mobility, not only transport, how mobility happens. And I fully agree with these three principles. Avoid, shift, and what was the third one?
Improve.
And improve, thank you. Because this is, let's say, this is also the basic thinking of the Verkehrswende. It has a lot to do with the behavior of consumers. As in many spaces, but I think in mobility, transport. So there is a lot of, I think, also of awareness in the public. We have a big discussion currently on diesel as a producer of not only of greenhouse gases, but of micro, I don't know what, pollutants that harm the air quality in cities. So I would say there are areas where we are quite far advanced. Other areas, for instance, if you want to buy a hybrid car, possibly Mercedes would not be the best solution currently, but a Japanese one. But there is an intensified discussion in the public, but also in politics, how to improve, how to get to this fundamental change. And if you allow me a short commercial break, I would like to promote an initiative that was launched by Germany at the Habitat 3 conference in Quito last year, the TUMI, the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative, which is aimed at working together. We have 8 international partners currently, from development banks, from United Nations, but also from other donor countries. The objective is to accelerate the implementation of sustainable urban transport development and mitigation, because this goes hand in hand. I think there are a few sectors where that comes as clear as in transport. mitigation and adaptation at the same time need to happen with 3 key areas. And this is mobilizing finance, building capacities, and promoting innovative approaches. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, now very literally spoken in the area of transport, but there are issues where solutions can be utilized in a much simpler way by getting awareness, and therefore to me the first word is transformative urban mobility initiative, because a transformation is necessary. That is quite for sure. And therefore I also think we should definitely ask our negotiators to define urban mobility measures in their NDCs. The NDCs are the tool through which mobility and climate come together. We need specific sector targets. Hopefully they should develop sector plans and legislation on urban and national mobility. And at the same time, I would really say we are at a very crucial stage in time, and it needs high levels of ambition from all sides. So let's set ambitious targets and goals, and well, Germany stands ready to support the mobility transformation elsewhere.
One question, TUMI is for export or TUMI is for home as well?
Honestly, it's for export.
Okay. So get up in the morning and look in the mirror if you want to find the German version of the vision.
But then let's take the second commercial break. This is an internal one, because 3 years ago we initiated something called the German Partnership for Sustainable Mobility. And this is something that should happen in Germany with German partners, but where we also export not cars, but mobility and logistics ideas. Starting with streetlights or our system of Schülerlotsen, which reduces, let's say, accidents of children going to school and so on.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the commercials. Very, very interesting, hands-on, which is, of course, what all of this has to be about. José Gomes Mendes, who is the Vice Minister for Environment in Portugal, and who I know has the same time constraints as myself about the next event that we need to be at. But José, it would be good to turn to you. Portugal, I think, through your administration, is one of those European countries willing to step up and be part of an avant-garde. And we're hearing that kind of sense in what France called the commercials. So taking up those themes, incentives, disincentives, setting targets, the regulatory system, where is Portugal on that journey towards turning that big vision into realizable action?
Okay, being the last one, if you prefer, I can stand, so maybe we do it faster. Well, as we have to talk in this closing session about the next steps for the transport sector, I would like to try to make a synthesis of what is the picture now before we understand what could be the next steps. First, we understand that transportation is a critical sector, critical for human development, for economic development. It's a sector that brings access to opportunities to billions of people. This is what transport and transportation is about. Now, the point is that this very same sector generates externalities, generates, in fact, negative externalities. We know that every year about 7.7 gigatons of CO2 equivalent are emitted, and this is the problem, and that these emissions can double by 2050. So what can we do before this? One thing that is clear from the sessions during the day is that there is no silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. What we need is a sort of a composition of solutions, a compromise solution to try to approach this problem. In this package, we have to approach, as you have said, measures for avoiding travel and for avoiding emissions, measures for shifting trips to more sustainable shared modes, and of course measures for improving the efficiency of vehicles and the efficiency of fuels. Now, there are good news about this, and the good news is that, in my view, most of the tools are already available. They do exist. It's a matter of finding a way to put them on the field. Now, there are some risks in this way. The first risk is to believe that this is just a technological problem. This is not just a technological problem. This has to do with people, has to do with organizations as well. So to close this topic, this agenda, to the technological side, in my view, is too poor and will not solve the problem. The second risk is that research and development could underperform in certain fields. We heard today, I think twice, Patrick saying that about negative emissions technology, we still have a long way to do. Because, you know, we can reduce to the maximum we can emissions by 2050, but there will be still emissions, particularly in the transportation field, which means that we have somehow to close them. I mean, to make them to zero. And for this, we need technologies to emissions offset, and we need technologies for negative emissions. Now, the lack of cooperation is another risk. This is a key word. States, companies, cities, non-state actors have really to cooperate, and this is what we have to look for. And because of this, we are just in a few minutes launching an alliance that puts together some of these players. Now, a huge risk is the risk of lack of public support. You know, we live mostly in democracies, and in democracies it's not that easy to gather public support for long-term objectives. You know, long-term roadmaps are very important, like the global roadmap of PPMC, which is very, very important, gives us the direction, gives us a menu of possibilities to approach and to mitigate the problems we have. But the point is that, you know, we have elections every 4 years, and to gather public support, we need to find quick wins. We need to show the people to appropriate what we have to do, the solutions that exist, and that they are good for their lives. We are not just taking away possibilities of accessibility to transport. No, we are trying to keep the same level of mobility, but at the same time trying to solve problems that are our problems, but are for sure problems for the next generation. So to gather public support is very, very important with quick wins. I can tell you that in Portugal, we decided to make this approach regarding decarbonization of cities. We put together a set of solutions for decarbonizing cities, and we launched a call for the cities to generate living labs for decarbonization. So this is a structured answer to the need for quick wins. So each city will have their living lab. We have for now 12. We are just developing the initiative, 12 living labs, and within these living labs, people, the citizens, the children, so on, can see, appropriate, test, visualize what are the benefits of decarbonizing technologies. We believe that in the next step, we can start generalizing these solutions to entire cities and hopefully to the rest of the country. This is our approach for the need for public support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I want to thank our three contributors for the self-discipline, but also for the views they've offered. I'm certainly not going to do a summary of a summary. What did strike me today in the several sessions that I've been around for, so I've been busy all day, but I haven't been able to get to every session that has been mentioned, is one, that this question of mobilizing publics, the many different publics, whether they're the corporate sector, citizens, cities, and so on, that the French method we heard this morning of les assises de la mobilité, of getting down on the ground, of mobilizing through different themes, is a methodology worth looking at, because its ultimate purpose is to give to the legislators a very deep brief of what the broad society in all of its manifestation thinks should be done, and then to produce some law. So I thought it was an impressive methodology that we heard, and one, you know, that each has to do it subject to their own political legacy and culture, but worth a look at. Two, I felt, particularly on the freight session today, that as someone described it when eventually I'd raised the question, someone from the floor said, in fact, it was the elephant in the room, which is the whole question of supply chaining. We can talk about new technologies and different fuels and so on, but the truth is, if our growth model and globalization process is endlessly going to lead to more global, constantly growing supply chains, inevitably that freight equation, even with improved vehicle standards and fuel standards, risks still to drive us in the wrong direction. That's a much bigger thing than transport only, but clearly something that needs to be looked at. And we notice that more and more the offer that we're getting as publics is delivery of goods anywhere, anytime, which is kind of the opposite to the logic of trying to manage things down to the resilience of closer localities or regions. So a lot there to be looked at that my guess is we've underexplored, even though it is indeed one of the several items on the list of 8 there to be looked at. And finally, and José brings it to my mind a bit about quick wins and bringing citizens with us, in addition to this issue of consultation, like les assises de la mobilité as an example, I think France mentioned the diesel question, the particulate matter in urban air. I think the issue of human health, human safety and quality of life are powerful invitations to citizens in day-to-day life to rethink some things that assist us to change transport policy, but where transport is not the driver, but where it's the outcome of a new assessment of urban health and safety and so on, and that we need to find the ways to persuade people. Some of it is regulation, some of it is tax or not incentives and disincentives, and some of it is about these other human things that we have a real value on, and that more and more we're associating with transport, but that the driver is the health and the safety dimension. In any event, I think we can close just about on time. For those who need to be somewhere else, we can get there. But for all those of you who've taken the time to be here, thank you so much for your attendance at the different events today. Thank you for your constancy to be here so late in the evening, this evening. And to our panelists, please show your appreciation.